Okay, so I want you to imagine something. A world where grief has a user interface, where that awful, heavy silence left behind when someone dies, well, it can be filled with a voice you can literally subscribe to. We're about to dive into a really fascinating story about this new, kind of seductive technology that's designed to solve the oldest human problem there is: loss. And what's the sales pitch? Well, it all boils down to this one haunting phrase, a phrase that, by the way, tested off the charts with grieving families. The idea is that grief isn't just something you have to suffer through, right? It's a skill, something you can practice, something you can get good at. It's like a rehearsal for that one, final, perfect goodbye. So what is this thing exactly? It's called the Echo. And what it does is, well, it takes all those digital breadcrumbs we all leave behind, your texts, your voicemails, your social media posts, all of it, and it stitches them together to create a conversational AI, basically a digital ghost that you can talk to. And the whole point, the big idea, is to offer some kind of comfort through this simulated presence. Okay, so now let's meet our main character, Marc. Marc is actually one of the architects of the Echo. I mean, he's one of the people who literally taught these machines how to comfort people. But then his own brother, Toma, dies. And suddenly, Marc is thrown into this massive personal crisis, caught between the pride he has in his work and this really deep ethical problem. Because, of course, his family wants to use the tech. They want to bring Toma back as an Echo. And this, right here, is where we get to the heart of the conflict. Because, as you can probably guess, not everyone thinks the Echo is a good idea. Not by a long shot. For some people, it's not a comfort. It's a total violation. And there's this whole organized movement starting to rise up to reject it, to fight for the right to stay silent, even after you're gone. And for Marc, here's the absolute kicker. His brother, Toma, was crystal clear about this. He actually signed a legal document, a refusal. He specifically said he didn't want to be animated. That's the word they use. So this isn't just some family argument over dinner anymore. No way. This has real, serious, moral, and legal stakes. So you've basically got these two completely opposing forces, right? It's a perfect contrast. On one side, you have the Echo. Its whole goal is to preserve a voice. Its method is reanimation, and its value is comfort. But on the other side, you have this group called the Quiet Archive. Their goal? To preserve a choice. Their method isn't reanimation, it's getting a refusal notarized. And their value isn't comfort through presence, it's dignity through silence. So, what's the weapon of choice for this refusal movement? It's something called a non-narrative will. Think of it as a legal tool pushed forward by this really key figure, Sanaa, who runs the Quiet Archive. It basically lets you formally opt out of being turned into a digital ghost. It's your way of saying, hey, my data can't be used for any of these posthumous derivative uses, as the lawyers call them. Okay, but here's where the story takes another turn. The promise of the Echo? It's got this hidden flaw, a really big problem buried deep inside its own code. And it's a problem that kind of blows up the whole idea of an authentic connection and shows us the real hidden cost of all this digital comfort. So how does the system really work? Well, to keep these echoes from sounding all robotic and fake, the AI needs a constant stream of new, fresh, real-world data. It needs to stay grounded. So the parent company actually pays gig workers, couriers, like this guy Niko, something called grounding bounties. And their job is to go out and capture the texture of real offline life. We're talking snippets of conversations, arguments, even private moments of grief. And this leads us to this really crucial, kind of creepy concept called autophagy. It literally means self-eating. And in the world of AI, it's what happens when a model starts training on its own output. It starts learning from the conversations it's having, from the grief scripts it's generating. It basically starts to mistake itself for reality. And the result is pretty tragic. All the echoes start sounding less and less like the actual people they're meant to be, and more like each other, and like a brand-approved script for how to be sad. Let's just walk through how this feedback loop actually happens. So first, the Echo platform generates its own unique grief styles. Phrases like, we can practice goodbye. Then the users, the grieving people, interact with those phrases, and they end up reinforcing them. Step 3, the model learns from its own outputs. It sees that reinforcement and doubles down. And finally, you get the inevitable result. The echoes all start to sound the same.
They become a hollow echo of the company's brand, not the person you loved.
So yeah, this isn't just some abstract technical problem for developers to solve. This collision of technology, grief, and the law, it just explodes. It turns into this series of really high-stakes human dramas, and they're playing out everywhere, in courtrooms, in public squares, and inside people's homes.
Take this court case, for example. It's the first big legal challenge to one of these non-narrative wills. The spouse's lawyer makes this argument. The decedent's refusal was executed before diagnosis. It does not incorporate therapeutic evolution. Basically, they're saying he couldn't have known how much his spouse would need this tool. They're framing the echo as a kind of therapy.
But then you hear the sister's side, and it's just raw, powerful emotion. She stands up and says, "He told me, don't turn me into something you can buy when you can't sleep." I mean, wow. She's defending his right to be remembered as a person, not consumed like some kind of digital product, an emotional aid for when you're lonely. And of course, the big corporations had to get involved. A lawyer for a huge insurance company makes this chilling argument. They say, we do not contest the refusal, we contest its scope. They argue that these echo streams are biographical evidence, so they're not even talking about grief anymore. They're trying to reframe personal data as a mandatory obligation to be archived. It's a whole other level. Then, the whole conflict just spills out into the open. A major TV network completely defies the non-narrative will of a really beloved news anchor, a woman named Anka Velish. And what do? They create a public echo kiosk of her and stick it right in the middle of a busy transit hall. Just like that, this fight over the right to refusal isn't a private family thing anymore. It's a full-blown public spectacle. And out of that whole mess, a city regulator delivers this incredibly powerful line. A line that becomes the rallying cry for the whole movement. They just say, context is not custody. Think about that. Just because you have access to someone's data, their context, that does not mean you own their story. It is not your property. It is not custody. And you know what? All these individual battles, they start to add up. The tide begins to turn. They start to win these tangible victories. The movement fighting for the right to silence actually starts to make headway, forcing the entire city to really think about and choose a quieter, more intentional way of living with both its technology and its grief. So, how do they win? It wasn't one big thing. It was a series of steps. You can see it here. It starts with Sanaa and the regulators physically unplugging that public kiosk, a huge public statement. Then, a massive citywide network outage, which people called the Black Famine, basically forces everyone into this accidental experiment of grieving without all the digital noise. After that, the couriers organize. They go on a ground strike and refuse to collect any more of those grief bounties. And all of this momentum builds and builds until it culminates in a landmark piece of legislation, the Silence Commons Act. And this act is a huge deal. It's not just symbolic. It creates legally protected capture-free zones and times. It means that if you violate those rules, you're looking at a fine for creating a public nuisance. It sets up a whole system for community stewards to enforce these quiet hours. But maybe most importantly, it takes the simple, basic human right to ask someone to stop and puts it directly into municipal law. And while all this is happening on the outside, Marc, the developer from the beginning, remember him? He does his own quiet little act of rebellion. From the inside, he secretly codes what he calls a lullaby of uncertainty right into the Echo's core programming. He basically teaches the machine to be less sure of itself, to admit its own limits, to say, I don't know. It's like this one small grain of honesty dropped right into the gears of the machine. And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. The technology offered the simple, really seductive answer. We can practice goodbye. But what this whole story shows us is that maybe some things just can't be practiced. Maybe they can't be rehearsed. So it leaves us with a really big question, a question for all of us. In a world that is desperate to offer a voice for everything, how do we practice goodbye? And maybe more importantly, what's the real value of the silence that's left behind?